Class of 92. Yeah.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the afternoon session. I hope you enjoyed this morning and also enjoyed your lunch. There has been a slight change to your programme. As you may have noticed, I'm not Walter De Silva. I'm Owen Reedy from Car Design News, and I'm going to be moderating this session. Now this morning we touched quite a lot about the idea of luxury, but also on the idea of building mainstream brands. But what we're going to do now is step back a little bit and look at how brand portfolios are curated by today's large multi-brand companies. And to help us do that, our first speaker today is Ralph Shields. He's the Global Head of Design for Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, and he's held this position only since April. So if you could show Ralph's video now, please.
The 7th largest automotive company in the world. We're still a humble company. My name is Ralph Shields. I'm Global Head of Design for the FCA Group. It's really exciting to have access to so many brands: Maserati, Alfa Romeo, Fiat, Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, and Ram. And we get to sketch on vehicles like the Challenger, the Viper, the Wrangler. In many ways, they're very iconic. As big as we are, there's still a small town feel inside the office. So you're not just a gear in the machine. We'll put a team behind you to support you. You get to work on real programs that you're going to see on the road someday.
It's always very rewarding when you see a car that you worked on rolling down the street and you can say, hey, I did that. I would say that's one of the coolest things. Hi, my name is Irina. I am exterior design manager for Chrysler and Fiat brands. I went to school in Cleveland Institute of Art. I've also worked recently on a 500L Vans edition for Fiat, and that was a concept car created for a surf event. Growing up, I was always drawing fashion, so car design was never something I considered. I went on a tour of Cleveland Institute of Art with my dad. Then when I saw the car drawings and clay models, I was hooked. Product design office, we all work very closely together. So you would have a very close interaction between designers and clay sculptors and engineers. We work very closely with our top management.
We work one-on-one with the designers. Their expertise is the 2D design, and they come up with these amazing sketches. It's our responsibility to capture it and put that into a 3D model. Hi, my name is Nate. I'm an industrial sculptor. I went to school at College for Creative Studies. I graduated from an industrial sculpting program. The culture here in Design Office is great. You get to meet people from all around the world. The last few years I was fortunate enough to go on an off-road trip with the Jeep design crew. Getting to know the vehicle, you're getting to know your friends, ultimately gives you a great experience back at work.
Sketching, user interface, animation, computer-aided design, color material. We have 4 studios across the world, from Michigan, Turin, Brazil, China. It really opens up a lot of doors. We're hiring from all over the world, but we're also sending people abroad. So you just never know where this adventure might take you.
Okay, Rolf, can you join us on the stage, please? Good to see you.
There it is. Yeah. Hello. First of all, I'm very happy to be here. Extremely, first time, actually second time in Tokyo. An incredible, beautiful city. Also, I want to say thank you to Shiro Nakamura putting on this fantastic event. I see some faces I've seen from many, many different design-related events, and it's great to see them here in Tokyo. So I don't really have a formal presentation. I'm actually looking forward to an open discussion. But one thing, being in this job now, the global job since April, it's been quite I don't know how to say it, a fire drill in a way for me. Been learning a lot about the premium brands, especially Alfa Romeo is a big project. We're in the process of completely overhauling the brand, redesigning it from the inside out, but at the same time respecting what it means. And it's amazing, as I travel the world, I learn more and more about what the brand means to people, which intimidates you sometimes as a designer. You have to respect that, but still push forward. So I look forward to having a great discussion with Owen and Shiro, so take care, enjoy. See you.
And our second speaker today is a man who needs very little introduction. It's Shiro Nakamura, the Senior Vice President and Chief Creative Officer of Nissan.
Okay. I speak in Japanese, so please use the headset.
Okay, I'll speak in Japanese. I get confused. As Owen has said earlier, we were supposed to have Walter De Silva here today. That was in the program. However, due to some unforced circumstances, he was unable to come. So I was supposed to serve as the moderator to talk about multi-brand management. And Ralph and Jill, together, American brand and Italian brands. Walter has like 12 brands, so we were going to talk about that. And that multi-brand strategy is now growing, and we wanted to see the two gentlemen talk, and I wanted to learn from that. However, Mr. De Silva was not available, so now I am here on the panel as the speaker. I'm sorry I don't speak Italian. In that sense, what I will talk from now on is this morning the top management of each brand had talked about the focused areas, but from my side I will talk about the multi-brand, and I've made some notes. When I think about multi-brands, except for the American makers, OEMs, before 1990s there were none. And since 1990s, a lot of alignment, mergers and alignment had taken place, and many brands got together. That's the way it was for the American brand. However, elsewhere this has occurred, and that has resulted in the emergence of multi-brands. Ford, Volkswagen Group is another example. The Western American European multi-brand was born that way, whereas for us, the Japanese multi-brand OEMs, what are we? There is a difference. The background is different. This morning, the speakers from this morning, they are all heading the multi-brand. Wagner, Lauren,
みんなもうマルチブランド
everybody is heading the multi-brand companies. And if you are a design head, that means you're the head of multi-brand company. This is a big trend. In the case of a Nissan, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to change the screen. I don't have to hold on to the microphone? Okay. Which one do I press? This is the Nissan Motor Corporation, the three brands that we possess. In Japan, people know us only as Nissan. However, globally, we have three different brands. On the left-hand side, we have Nissan, Infiniti in the center, and Datsun. Those are the three brands that we deploy. Why do we have these three? I would like to look back on the history and want to share that with you. To start off with, it was back in 1933 that Nissan Motors was established, and it has a very complex history. At the beginning, the name of the company, the brand was Datsun. The company name was Nissan, but we began as the brand Datsun. This is the beginning. And then we were focused in Japan, and some went to the US, exported. This is the same for Toyota as well. And then in 1981, we no longer had Datsun, we only had Nissan. It was merged into Nissan alone. And then in 1989, Infiniti was added to the lineup. And a little bit earlier, Toyota began Lexus before this. And out of one name, multiple brand began in Japan. And now this is how it looks like today. We are covering more markets, and Datsun, since 2014, we have launched the Datsun brand. So we are now working under 3 brands. And in China, we have Venusia, the local brand. If we include that, we have 4 brands. Then why do we have all these names? As I have said, in American, European companies, it was a conglomeration of different brands. In our case, it was one company that had split up into several sections. So we end up having several brands. However, the development phase was different. And why did this happen? We talked about the diversification of the demand coming from the customers and also how that can be balanced with the brand strategy. I think this applies to us and also to Toyota. We begin from the 1-liter compact car to the big trucks. So we have a big product portfolio. What happens is that we have the markets and the customers that's so diversified. It would make it difficult for us to offer one single brand value to all of the different segments. Therefore, we have come up with the idea of diversifying the brands as well. And this was a necessity for us. We have a 3+1 different brands, and it has taken us about 25 years for us to reach this stage. The brand management in Japan today is still very behind compared to American or European names. And finally, we have reached this stage of having the different brands set up in different markets. And in presenting this today, I was talking with Ralph, and since 3 days ago, I have been thinking about the differences. So even though we are both global multi-brand companies, I think we're different. In that sense, I think the Japanese people and American people, European people have different points of view. That's one thing. And moving on, as has been discussed earlier, I don't want to talk too much about each terminologies. However, this is a brand statement that we have at Nissan. In the case of Nissan, it's innovation and excitement for everyone. I think everybody's talking about innovation and excitement, but what's most important in this line is the third line, everyone, for everyone. Nissan has to be approachable, so this has to accommodate a lot of people, everyone. And then Infiniti becomes more exclusive. That's the element of performance and hospitality that has to be incorporated. And then coming to Datsun, this is more for the emerging economies, India and Russia and Indonesia. Those are the 3 countries where we have initiated this brand, and it's going to be expanded going forward. So it is for the customers that is generated in the emerging countries, and it's Dream Access Trust that stands for that. At Datsun, we have Dan Aoyama-san and another person that starts with the name T. So DAT is the keyword. And it's not that everything had started from scratch. When we think about brand, it has to be authentic, and it's also about us. So it's not that we create something from scratch. It's something we had in ourselves. There must be something like a DNA or heritage. That's where it comes from. The brands come from. And at the bottom it says heritage and DNA. I'm serving as the head of design team. At the same time, from 2006, I was taking care of the brand management business. And I had thought about the values of Nissan brands. And finally, everything was chaotic, but now I have managed to put those into those 3 segments. And this is nothing new. For example, this is what I can explain. This is the first time I'm showing this way in a presentation like this. Those are the cars that represents each line, like Datsun on the far right. It was in 1958, then when we had 210, model 210. This was durable, it was simple, and DAT, this is DAT itself. This is the starting point of this brand, Datsun. And we also had Nissan Silvia. It was not cheap, but it did not cost so much to produce it either. There was just a simple ladder frame and a nice body was put on top of that. So it's not a high-performance car, and it's not that we had spent a lot of cost making this. However, the customer were very much excited about it. So this was one of the iconic models back then. And then this is also something I say for the first time in public. The root of infinity comes from here, Prince. As a lot of Japanese would know, I don't think the visitors from overseas would not know that in 1967 we had the company Prince that was merged. Nissan was merged with Prince. And Prince had a lot of high technology. And like a Subaru, it used to be the company, and back then it was a luxurious car. It used to be an aircraft manufacturer. And within the Nissan Motor Company, we had all those different lines. And what I have done was to reorganize everything that was within the company and reorganize and position it so that it can be communicated to the external world. That's what I had done. And this is the concept about the brand. And as a designer, I wanted to reproduce that or reflect that into the forms and the designs that each brand would produce. And this is what I call design aspects. We offer values and we create a cohesive brand image. So everything is integrated, uniform, like the front face and the themes. This is the way we separate the 3 brands. And as Lawrence has mentioned, there's the value, and it is to be put into a style or form. That is the task of the designers. That's how I feel. And this is another example. Those are the production cars for Nissan recently. The design aspects I've spoken about and the design form language are expressed this way in emotional geometry. And this is from Nissan, Altima, and Bricks, and Sway. They will go into production soon. Those are the show cars. And then in the Infinity brand, we have 930, Q930, 960, 980. Those are the new series where our new brand values are expressed. And then coming to Datsun, as I have said, that's a D-cut grille, very simple and robust design is taken up here. So these are the propositions we have from the 3 brands. And this is something about the organization. I am the Chief Creative Officer at the top, and I have in my team Executive Design Director for each brand. I think some of them will be sitting at the back. And they are managing the brands, Global Infinity brand manager and so forth since 5 years ago. And I am in the position to manage all those 3 together. And below, We have a US, Japan, China, Europe, different designs, studios. Before, the organization itself was ambiguous and the facilities were not also clearly defined. So I have put them everything into a neat organization. And everything used to be done, sometimes everything together, but I have split them up into different functions, and also the regions were reorganized and the tasks were also reorganized. And finally, as the design heads have said earlier, there is the product concept and the brand concept, and it goes into design, and then it is goes into marketing phase and communication phase. There is this big flow. It has to be viewed from that top in order to communicate the brand. And as Maeda-san has said, there is marketing and communication that also has to incorporate the design perspective. And it was in 2006 that my position became Chief Creative Officer. Until then, I was called a design head. And up to here, I used to be responsibility, but from here onwards, I was not able to say anything. I was not involved. And here in this area, where it says customer experience, I am now responsible for everything. And as it is today, everything has to be clearly defined. I feel that that's the importance, and for this reason, I have come up with this name, Chief Creative Officer, and I'm now trying to give substance to this name, Chief Creative Officer. It still takes time, but that's my aim. And going forward, not just for the multi-brands, but for all the automakers, for the brand heads, you need some talent and capacity to create something in the first place. And on top of that, it has to be managed well. That's the difficult task, and that's what I'm involved in. I'm sorry I have taken a lot of time. And then the last slide. Since everybody's talking about the motor show, let me do that too. Tomorrow, Mazda comes first, then Renault, and number 3, it's Nissan's turn. Nissan IDS. 2 years ago, we had IDX. It's entirely different from that. This is for autonomous driving IDS. This will be shown tomorrow by Cars Gong. Thank you. Please come and visit us.
Thank you, Shiro. Very interesting. We don't have too much time, so I think we're going to go straight into a discussion. And Ralph, I'm going to start with you. Are you kind of almost jealous to see the position that Shiro's in? Obviously, he's been there for Nissan now for 15 years.
Yeah.
Had lots of time to kind of get everything into order. You've only been doing the job that you're currently in now for since April,
Yeah.
and actually you now manage Fiat, Abarth, Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Alfa Romeo, Maserati, Lancia, and Ram. So you're very much at the beginning of your journey. What are the difficulties and the challenges that you've experienced so far in that? I'm sure it's kind of an overwhelming
Yeah.
thing to go through.
First of all, starting tomorrow, I'm going to call myself Chief Creative Officer. I like that title. It sounds really important. It would be, I think as designers, and there's a lot of designers in the room, I think we understand brands intuitively. You really study brands. Every project we do, we spend sometimes months putting together image boards and really getting into the brands. But what's happened at Chrysler and FCA now is my boss loves brands. Sergio is obsessed with the concept of brands. And about 5 years ago, he divided the company into brand leaders. So we have CEOs all over the place, but they're all brand-centric, and they become almost warriors for their brands. So it makes my job a lot easier because they come already with a recipe that's very unique. We want no more copycat cars. I mean, honestly, every company is guilty of this at one point, but we had a lot of badge engineered cars with very similar body styles, almost just different grills. Those days are completely over. So that part of the job is a lot easier. The harder part now is shepherding, is justifying it, right? Making the product so almost that you don't have to explain it, it speaks for itself. So every time we create new cars, we have to, I call it paying into the equity of each brand. It's our job as designers to reinforce the brand, almost to make it stand by itself. You know, I like to say, leave the place better than you found it, leave the brand much better than you found it. I mean, there are brands we have in our company that are, 3 of them are over 100 years old. You know, so it's really daunting. We're only visitors. We hold them like a chalice for a little while, then hand it on to the next designer. So it's a very intimidating job, but it's a lot of fun.
And Shiro, maybe we can go back over the kind of the 15-year process that you've gone through. How did you get to the point that you are now? At what point did you start to come up with this plan?
Maybe in Japanese? Okay. さっき言いましたけど
As I said previously, 15 years ago, I mean, it has taken a long time. Back then, there was this brand, Nissan, and there was also Infiniti. But back then, Infiniti was it was just a badge engineering of Nissan. So a Nissan car simply had the Infiniti badge. So 945. Back in 1989, this was a wonderful model, but back then there was no brand management at all. And then, as I said, what Nissan had, I mean, what assets that Nissan had, and spirit. Looking into it and using such assets, what we could do for the customers, that is what we thought about, and challenges and difficulty.
もともと一つのチームですから
Because it started as one team, people who designed the Infiniti and people who designed the Nissan, they were a part of the same team, so they had the same spirit. But now the team had to be separated, and each had different target customers. But still, we had to be faithful to the brand strategy. So we put together a strategy and created venues. And Ralph probably is thinking about how to put things together. But we thought more about how to separate things, how to split things. Because if you don't do anything, things become quite similar internally. Infiniti and Nissan may tackle with the similar themes. And in my position, I have to say, no, you can't go that way. So to do things appropriately in order to be faithful for each brand, that was my part of my job. And as I said previously, although it's one company, completely different design, roots exist. Maybe not completely different, but brands with different characters. That is what we were hoping to do, and it has taken more time than I anticipated, but now I think we are beginning to be successful.
As Shiro said, you're probably thinking more about how you bring things closer together. It's almost, there are two separate companies, Fiat and Chrysler, and they've now been brought together. You've actually inherited the management of especially the Italian side of the business. How are you going to manage that? Are you going to bring things closer together? Are you going to further separate, or do you not know yet?
No, I do know. We're actually in the process of putting the studios closer together in terms of resources. We're floating the talent pool. For example, I have Italians sketching on Jeeps, and for the first time ever, we have Americans sketching on Alfa, right? So it's a lot of fun. It's funny because sometimes the Americans are more passionate about the brands than the Italians are, because they look at it from such a purified vision. They don't remember the bad Alfas. They only remember the good-looking ones and the sexy ones. So in a way, they come at it with an innocence that is actually good to pull from. And the same thing with the Italians. I had them they, on their own. They took on the Renegade a little bit. It ended up being done in the United States, but they had a chance to play with it, and they had the time of their lives. So yes, we're going to pull that together. But in terms of dividing the brands, absolutely, it's what I lose sleep over that. I don't want anyone to say, and there's people struggling. When we built the Renegade test vehicles, we actually used Fiat 500 shells. And I was getting hate mail from people. It was like, you're making the Jeeps look like Fiats. I mean, I had to look for security every night, But I think the outcome, if you look at the Renegade is a good example of using common engineering, but I think very different ethos in terms of styling. The way the cars drive even is very different. So it's a struggle because economically it makes sense to commonize what you can, but that's where we come in as designers.
Sure.
May I ask to you?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, one thing because I wanted to ask you guys, because you are American, right?
Canadian American.
Oh, Canadian American, but
Caribbean.
yeah. But
Whatever works best that night.
Yeah. And I'm Japanese.
Yes.
I'm managing Japanese brand.
Yes.
It's easy, and all of it's natural.
Yeah.
Now you have been managing American brand, right?
Yeah.
Now you are managing Italian brand.
Yes.
How do you cope with working together with Italian? It's particularly it's a very historical, strong brand, and the Italian is it's very passionate.
Yes.
How do you?
Well, the good
manage
news
it?
is I'm in a listening mode. I've been spending the last 5-6 months. I'm not an autocratic type of leader to start with. I'm not the kind that says this is how it should be. I'm paying attention a lot. I actually forced myself. I've been spending a lot of time in Italy, traveling Italy as a tourist almost, just to understand the culture and understand Europe in general. But I give them a lot of voice. I have a great leadership team underneath me that come with great ideas. So I try not to impose my will. And it's hard. As an American and even a North American, I have a very different concept of what a car is and how it can be used, but I'm learning very quickly. But really it's about giving the designers the power. But at the same time, I think my ignorance is helping in a way because you can get stuck in a pattern a little bit. So I'm helping them to be even more Italian than they are. I think that's one thing I'd like to see Alfa and Fiat in general is not trying to be a European brand or a German brand. I want them to be Italian. I want the car to feel Italian, look Italian, act Italian, sound Italian. So that's what we're trying to do right now is really turn the heat on the culture of the brands.
Thank you.
It's kind of interesting as well, if we're talking about defining what a brand is, we're now in a situation where a lot of brands have a very clear kind of family design. I know, for example, Shiro with Nissan, it started off the kind of first generation of cars that you worked on, if you look at something like the Cube, and then the Micra and the GTR, all very, very different designs, all very much a Nissan, but very different. Whereas now, Nissans have much more clear brand identity. How do you manage that and also ensure that design creativity is still possible within that framework?
Glad you got that
Yeah.
question.
Well, that question. Well, Fukuichi-san has left already, but the design head of Toyota and Nissan to that question. That's really the challenge that we're faced with, both as the head of Nissan and Toyota. So we are a department store with different designs. That's what you used to be in the past. But that era, those days, it was a Japanese market that was our main target back in 1980s or 90s. So rather than the brand per se, like Cube or March or Skyline, those names had a higher brand value than the Nissan brand per se in those days. From non-Japanese people, it might be difficult to understand. In overseas, the brand has a much higher value than the car models' names. But in Japan, until recently, even now maybe, the models' names, in the case of Toyota, Crown, or in the case of Nissan, Skyline, has a much bigger value, the brand value, compared to the company value. So that's really the biggest challenge faced by the Japanese design managers. That has been the biggest task. But as the market is changing, the Japanese, there are bigger markets overseas than the Japanese market, so we have to change our mindset. So we're now shifting to expressing a consistent design. So creativity and different models, brand values, we need to make sure that those are not damaged. So there needs to be a consistent brand expression, and that's a theme. In fact, in our case, in Nissan's brand, that's what we are very careful. Crossover, sedan, and hatchback were shown. The design elements or aspects are the same, but the characters as a car is completely different from one to another. So that's the way we do. But on the other hand, Infiniti, as was shown earlier, as you can tell, brand audience is more limited, so we can be more creative in the limited audience. So in focusing or narrowing down the themes with our feelings, we feel like we will lose our freedom and creativity, boring the designers. But in the case of, for instance, Audi, although we don't have them today with us, Audi designers, we used to say that Audi designers must not have much freedom, but in fact, that's not the case. Within that framework, they are pursuing the creativity. In that sense, we have to change to the new way of working, and within that, how to express our passion and emotion. That's the direction that we've been shifting towards. And just because that's the trend, it doesn't mean that the designers cannot express ourselves. So we are freely and lively trying to express the brand strength, and that's how the designers are working, striving for.
What's the word? You are responsible for some very iconic models, probably in the case of Shiro, things like the Z and the Skyline. Ralph, in your case, brands such as Alfa Romeo and Maserati, people very, very passionate about those things. What do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to leave these things after you've had your time with them?
Wow, it's a good question. You want to make, I like the idea of creating icons real time. I think there are a lot to draw from that have been there, and like the Challenger is an example as well of something that was done. And we look at the past fondly, but I think it's time for this generation to create fresh ones, right? And that's what we're struggling with. The Alfieri concept, the Maserati concept, was part of trying to point in a fresh direction for Maserati, and you're going to see the influence of that vehicle really penetrate all of the brand. And that's always, I think, companies hide their visions in plain sight in concept cars, so that's part of getting the kickstart of the idea. But the way I'd like to look back is exactly that, where the car is unmistakably a Maserati, right? I think that brand should mean something no matter what it becomes in 50 years. If it becomes all electric, autonomous, whatever, it's still a Maserati. So there should be an undeniable, I want it to be like a Rolex watch or those big brands that are just so big, they need no explanation. And it's kind of already there, but you can't take it for granted. You must invest in it and everything. So it's daunting. I'm intimidated, but at the same time motivated.
And we're kind of running out of time, so this would probably be my final question. But it seems to me that the thing that you have in common is that you both report to very strong CEOs. In Shiro's case, Carlos Ghosn. In your case, Marchionne. Both, very, very public figures, and you both report directly to them. How do you manage that relationship?
Can a journalist leave the room? First of all, I love that I report directly. There was a time when I was with that banking company, I forget, Cerberus, when I worked for engineering, and it was terrible. It was disgusting, and I did not look forward to going to work every day. But working for the CEO is the way design should be. It really is important to have a seat at the table. It's really easy. My boss loves design. He's passionate about it. In fact, he pushes me, which is great. Doesn't like to settle for something boring. He's really easily bored, right? So it makes it fun. But at the same time, he does have no patience for, I would say, complacency. He really wants us to think up next. And every time I show him 3 or 4 concepts, he always picks, sometimes I have to pull him back. He picks the most risky one. And I find myself like, what I'm telling him to maybe, I do that as almost a game, hopefully I get the one in the middle. He always picks the extreme one. So And I know, as from my experience, sometimes it's not the best solution for the real marketplace. So it's fun. We have a great exchange, and I hope that never changes. Whoever the CEO is, I want to be close to.
Sure.
Yeah, and my boss is Carlos Ghosn. I'm now direct reporting him. And he's a great businessman. And at the same time, he had a very nice sense of the shape. And he currently very much interested in contemporary art. I'm helping him to buying the contemporary art, by the way. So anyway, beyond the business, beyond our own business, we have a very nice, the casual relation, and it's good. And he is very demanding, but he's never directing or dictating. That's very, very good for us. By the way, that gentleman over there, he has the same boss, by the way. Lawrence has the same boss. So we have to be careful with him because he's doing better than me. I have to better than him. But anyway, this is a good.
He has cooler shoes than.
But this is, he is really overseeing the very big alliance. But he is very supportive for design.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I think we're running out of time. Can we thank Ralph and Shiro, please? I think that was really, really interesting. Thank you. Thank you. And next up onto the stage, we're having a slight change of pace. We're having a keynote speaker, and today's keynote speaker is Tim Kobe from 8 Inc. So Tim, if you'd like to join us on stage.
This is this is my clicker.
No laser.
Okay, no pointer. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
So, thank you. Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be here at the Design Forum. As a non-car designer yet, I'm really jealous of what you guys are doing, and I think it looks like you have a lot of fun. So I think it's really great. I'm going to talk a little bit about return on experience today. The idea that everything that we're creating is about creating experience for people, and hopefully provide some insights in terms of the way this is manifested through various projects. I started the company 25 years ago plus in San Francisco, and we've really been working across multi-brands as well, but multi-brand categories. And I think that that's very interesting from the standpoint of looking at points where we can see influence, but also looking at things that may be being disrupted in one category and start to have influence on others. So today I'll talk about 8 key points, things that we think are important in creating return on experience. And for us, we think that return on experience is actually better return on investment. And so hopefully I'll walk you through this. The first one is that we believe that all experience is holistic, that we all experience things in a holistic way. And with that, it means we need to start to understand the relationship of things in a way that helps to reinforce that holistic approach. For any of the great brands that we've talked about today, they all have focused and described their values and understand why they should exist, what they mean to people. On the other hand, there are people, and the world is full of change and different points of view and different attitudes, and of course it's having the same impact on the automotive category. But what's interesting is we see 4 areas that we see as really key elements when you're affecting any type of experience. And that means the environments, the products and the service, the behavior, and the communications all have to be thought of in a holistic way. So anything that you really care about, whether it's your favorite restaurant, your favorite city, or your best friend, it consists in some form in these 4 realms. And so for us, designing something in isolation is something where we see many brands getting off track. Today, if you look at different categories, essentially every business is digital. I don't know of one that hasn't been influenced by that. And what it means is that you can be in a physical space at any given time. You can also be in a digital space at the same time. And so the commonality, the consistency is really the experience that you make, whether it's a physical or digital thing. The idea that there's a polarity in that is basically gone away. Now it's simultaneous today. But what it means is there's opportunities for new engagements. There's new opportunities that can be created because of physical and digital relationships. And it doesn't mean that these disruptions have to be negative. In fact, they can be incredibly liberating and provide incredible value for your customers. It's interesting that particularly in the automotive category, and we see every large tech company sort of jumping on this bandwagon, I guess, is that many companies fear what the large tech companies are doing, but secondarily fear what the smallest startups are doing. And so we're in a really interesting time where speed and disruption is kind of the thing to fear most, that our scale and our ability to move and react is being more and more inhibited by size. And I think there's a great opportunity for people to start to look at how they can become more nimble. One of the interesting things that happened last year actually was that the percentage of sales that have been influenced by digital surpassed 50%. It's the first time in history. And what's interesting is it means that the content that you're creating, again, going back to those experience realms, the communications component has to work in concert and work with the physical environments and with the products and services in a holistic way. We're also seeing in terms of retail, and our background in retail is quite extensive, but when you get people to engage in retail before the purchase, which is very common in the automotive category, and also during the purchase, we're seeing the highest conversions and we're seeing the greatest brand lift. So what that means is the content that you're producing in various forms has to become consistent with that overall experience of what your brand stands for, those values that we all talked about earlier today. Number 2 is beware of best practices. The interesting thing about best practices is it creates very good, efficient verticals, which is good if that's your job. But people experience things holistically. It means those verticals are experienced together. And so, why do we see this statistic? If many companies focus on creating incredibly differentiated products, but they turn around and deliver them the same way as their competitors, ultimately they're creating commodity. So when you start to see the products sold the same way, when you start to see other brands emulating one another, you start to create parity in the industry. If you create parity in the industry, you start to make commodity. And the more you turn your product into a commodity rather than having a distinguishing value, the harder and harder it is to compete. Virgin is one of our clients. We were hired the same year as we were hired by Apple to have a look at their airline lounges. And one of the ways was to think about how to separate a relatively small airline, a relatively small capital. How can they separate from all the other carriers? And the big idea for this was to start to look at the experience, and the experience through the lounges, understanding that the lounges are part of a narrative that connects that experience from when you think about traveling to when you get to your destination. And for us, it meant a way to separate the Virgin experience from others. It meant a physical touch point to understand the way the brand lives, the way people will experience it, and how it can come to life. And ultimately, it's manifested in, this is the largest lounge in Heathrow, completed more than 10 years ago, consistently in the top 3 lounges in the world. But it's because of understanding the distinctive aspects of a Virgin experience and then being able to bring those to life. We've also worked with Virgin over the years, from A380 interiors to hotels to casinos on down the line. But a big part of that is taking a white paper that's a business idea and turning that into a representation of the experience. Point number 3 is about word of mouth. We all know that word of mouth is important. What's interesting is direct experience with the brand is what drives the majority of word of mouth. So what that means is what you convey through that direct experience has to be seen as having incredible importance, whether that's touching, feeling, driving the vehicles that you make, but the entire brand experience. It means starting to think about the community that your customers represent. The people that you connect with the values that you have, start to form a community and start to share common values and common beliefs. And of course, in automotive, we know that there's this balance that needs to be struck between the functional brand ideal and the aspirational one. And this is something that many other retailers don't necessarily have the access to. I think in the automotive category, you probably have the greatest access to. But in working with one of our clients in cycling, they lost track of the fact that they actually possess an incredible amount of aspirational equity. And I think we tend to get caught up in the shape and the lines and things in the automotive category, but recognize what the experience value is and how that can be heightened. For the Apple stores, the idea of creating the Genius Bar, this was about putting the words we want people to say about the experience, putting those words in their mouths, giving them the tools to talk about the experience. So if we would have called this a service counter, no one would have cared. But because it was a proprietary name and a proprietary experience, then people could talk about it and then define an Apple distinctive experience. And word of mouth also is very important throughout the culture. This is interesting. In a month ago, when the market lost over $1 trillion in 3 days, Howard Schultz wrote to all of his staff an email talking about understanding that the stress on their customers may be very high at this point, and recognizing that the service that his staff give to his customers needs to be focused and understand the context that they're in. But again, this goes to building the behavior and the culture from the top down. The fourth point is focusing on human outcomes. And the idea here is to really start to understand what is happening around us. The world, in terms of our target audiences, are representing different values than, say, my generation or other generations. We need to understand what are the values that they stand for and start to target those products towards those things. And it's a simple thing to say, but it's a very difficult thing to do. We know that we're having different explorations in the way we consume our products today. We know we have unresolved environmental issues. How do we move from hyper-consumption era to something where collaborative consumption starts to really fundamentally change maybe the way we sell our vehicles and the way we approach our markets? This is a project looking at traditional fuel station and what could be done there. But beyond making it easier or better or faster or smarter, we wanted to try to influence this and try to bring life to a relatively tired model, and try to think about new things, details in the experience that can start to shift the way people interact with these things. And if we're able to move a brand from preference to passion, we see an enormous value and an enormous multiplier. And that idea of focusing on the little things that drive the passion and the connection to the brand is something that I think can be incredibly valuable and is very often underestimated. The fifth point is looking at irrational loyalty. And so what is irrational loyalty? This is a project for RED where a concept for getting AIDS relief medication to Africa was a very important thing, but was not getting the traction. And so by saying, this issue is important to all of these companies and putting this community of common interest together, there was an incredible amount of uptake and an incredible amount of traction, and has had a phenomenal impact on the problem. But what it means is then understanding where are the emotional threads that we can tap on. And for us, form follows function. We were taught this in school. That's baseline today. Anybody who's not doing those things, you're probably not in the game. But understanding that the emotional connection is the place where you can start to differentiate, particularly when the industry is achieving more and more parity. And irrational loyalty comes at a time, irrational loyalty can be valuable when when you're at a time where maybe you produce a product that stumbles or a product that isn't perfect. That irrational loyalty, the connection to a brand, is something that's very hard to achieve and very hard to retain once you lose it. But it's something that can help you through difficult times and struggles in the design. But what it means is we have to have relationships. We have to understand that we're in the business of developing relationships with our customers. It's not about the transaction. It's great if you sell the car, but that's not the point. What you need to do is develop that relationship, and those transactions will continue to follow. And so it means shifting some of the postures that we normally think about in these relationships. It means thinking about the ecosystem and where we are in terms of providing insights and value to the people who are buying our products. How we can move from just engagement to something where happiness and well-being are things that are most important in terms of human outcomes. And point 6 is taking risk. The night before we opened the Apple Store, Steve was sitting on a table and said, you know, guys, what if no one comes tomorrow? And at the time, we were shocked that he would say it at that moment. But the idea of him betting the company at that time was something that he was very, very concerned about. And he was concerned because Bloomberg and others were telling him that it was completely insane to be doing the Apple program, and that they were predicting a catastrophic failure. And so the idea of understanding that unless you're hearing noise from what you're doing, you're probably not disrupting things enough, and that it's important and you should be comfortable with creating some type of friction in the system. Fortunately, Bloomberg wrote a much better article 10 years later. But if you think about what the risk was, the idea of not doing the Apple Store was probably billions of dollars. The cost of doing the first one was a few millions of dollars. So where is the risk? The idea of waiting and seeing what happens can be fatal. And of course, it's gone on into many different shapes and forms over the years. But the passion and loyalty that comes from designing an experience that's very much the extension of the core brand values and having that resonate with a broad audience is hard to discount. Oh, and it makes money, by the way. So don't worry about the money to begin with. The money comes. It's just a matter of making a great connected experience and making great products. People will buy the products. Point 7 is around empathy. Whenever we started a project, it was always understanding, what does this do for people? It goes beyond just what it looks like, but what does it do in people's lives? This is a project that we worked on for Citibank, but in our testing, the only thing that scored lower than a bank experience was actually a car buying experience, just FYI. But this was really an opportunity for Citibank to shift the way they go to market. And this was a different way of thinking about the ecosystem. And automotive category is one of the few where you still don't directly control the relationship with your customer. Probably one of very few in the world. But with Citi, what we did was we looked at a different type of ecosystem, a different way of touching the customer in different places, but making it relevant to the way they live. So if we could put a smaller functioning service point in a transit location, for example, we would see incredible uplift and uptake. If we can do it in mobile, the same way we can do it in other locations, then the bank was coming to the customers and starting to become relevant in their lives. And we moved from 57th in customer satisfaction, which is where Citibank was initially, to first, and went through a number of pilots, and this program has now become the global rollout for Citibank. And so the last point is really to reiterate on the idea of return on experience being better return on investment. We recently completed a program for Lincoln in China, which was, as we looked at the project to begin with, was really based on this idea of last mover advantage. They were probably the last people to go to China in terms of a luxury brand. And so from that perspective, it gave us an opportunity to look at what everyone else was doing and not do that. but to try to define something as different. How can we change the interaction? How can we change the support that the people have with the customers? And this meant making it a ubiquitous journey, something that goes from when you first start searching and thinking about buying your car to when you purchase it, and then follow up with service and other aspects after the sale. And I'll show a little video to explain the service model. But it's integrating this component of technology as a core thread throughout the entire experience.
A door opens. They greet you by name, no matter how long it's been. You are listened to, understood. Your needs are attended to before you are even aware of them. And if you feel like the most important person in the room, that's because you are. It's exactly what you'd expect from a 5-star hotel or your favorite restaurant. But is it what you'd expect from a car company? It will be soon, because this fall, Lincoln is coming to China. In its 100-year history, Lincoln has created some of the finest vehicles ever made. Cars that were loved and owned by those who could have had any car they wanted. And now, Lincoln is also bringing something new to China. A vision to treat every customer with the same level of care and attention that Lincoln brings to the design of its cars. To anticipate their needs in intuitive, imaginative ways. To introduce a new kind of luxury to a new China driver. One who is defined by experiences, not riches. One who understands that the essence of luxury is the experience. You see, Lincoln's idea was never to be all things to all people, but to be everything to those who expect more from a luxury car maker than simply a luxury car.
So the program was launched last November. In May, broke the record for the most Lincoln cars ever sold in history in a month. In June, it broke the record again. In July, it broke the record again, and so on. The program has been rolling out at about 25 locations per year is the target. We're currently moving into a second phase in terms of working in the digital space. But one of the things is that by shifting this experience and by understanding the cultural connection that goes with this, we've been able to find a nice sweet spot, and we think the program is going to do very well for them. But I'll end with a few points here. This is something where we need to understand what innovation is. Innovation is when people adopt it, and it's not just having the idea. The idea is a great start, but when it matters to people, they adopt it. And that's where we see value. And innovation fundamentally has change. When you look at some of the most valuable brands in the world, what is it that distinguishes Facebook from MySpace? It's because the design led to the adoption, and the adoption led to value. Here, how you do something matters so much. And talking to a room full of designers, it's an easy thing to sell, but that's really the importance of our job is beyond just creating something new, but making something that really connects with people. We've been very lucky to work with some incredible people. I think people who really understand the idea that what you're making has value, and if you think about this, it's the kind of people who become ingrained in the culture, who capture your imagination, and the people who are remembered, and it's because you're making something that matters. And so for us, the future of design is really about human interaction. And the more we understand about human interaction, the more we understand about the psychology behind the behavior, the better chance we have of creating great things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. I thought it was a really fascinating insight. I think it's always good with these things to have some kind of context as a framework for what we've been discussing. It's also a really great segue into the session that we are going to use to close the conference today, which is all about new technologies. So right now we have another coffee break upstairs, and then if you join us for the final session, and then that was it. Thank you.
Thank you.